Denise. How are you?
Hello, Ginger. I'm here on a very cold Madison, Wisconsin day. It's supposed to be like this in January, but we got spoiled with a few warm days last week. So here we are. How are you doing in the heart of the Midwest, Kansas
You
City?
know, what I'm reading on the news just a few minutes ago, it's January 21st, the worst winter storm in 5 years below us, like Oklahoma and Texas and all the way up to the east. It's really overwhelming that Oklahoma could get like 20 inches of snow.
Wow. Sorry, Oklahoma.
Yeah, we want all our midwife friends and families to be safe out there. I have a son in Austin, and they're getting ready for ice down there. So, big weather storms coming in this weekend.
They don't like ice down there.
I know they don't know what to do. So you know what, Denise, our first podcast has really surprised me. If you look at all the different ways people could listen to us, like Buzzsprout or YouTube, if you
Spotify.
want to watch us, yeah, um, iTunes, we're approaching 400 views.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you,
I think we really
listeners.
should just tell everyone we're so appreciative and hopeful that some of what we can bring really does motivate, inspire, keep keep on keeping on, right?
Absolutely. That's why you're still doing it, Ginger.
Yeah, I did put a post up because several people have asked me, "Aren't you retiring?" And I'm like, "Nah, I'm not going anywhere yet."
I have to say, everybody, she did have this grand plan a year ago,
Yeah,
and it became kind of silent around her birthday, and here she is working harder than
yeah,
ever. Thank you,
yeah.
Ginger.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, Denise, we're going to keep our format and go into new news.
New
This
news.
is this is like, oh my God, two podcasts in a row with legal content. Joe, my husband, who's an attorney, is like all over this. So I'm doing my morning search of like what I want to post out on social media, and I there are some secret keywords I use, but anyway, up pops a law firm who dropped a press release at about 7:30 p.m. last night. And this is from the law firm who is one of three legal entities representing the American College of Nurse Midwives in a federal lawsuit against the state of Mississippi.
That's incredible.
Any idea what it's about?
Oh, I do have an idea only because I got up really early this morning and read your post.
Yeah, so what do you think? Tell our listeners who may not know yet, and let's talk about it for a minute.
Well, it's kind of amazing. Mississippi is a little bit behind, being a
Yeah.
state in Wisconsin that is recently worked for, independent practice, but
Right.
requiring a collaborative practice agreement with a physician, many of which very few have that. Many physicians aren't really willing or at a very high price to have a collaborative practice agreement with the midwife. Um, so many states are moving away from that, and ACNM is really advocating for obviously well-trained professionals that don't require that,
Yeah.
provide good care.
You know what really struck me? I had the pleasure of going down to Meridian, Mississippi last fall to do a consult and visited two hospitals in that town who serve childbearing families and sat in the C-suite with the CEO and their team in both hospitals and listened to them talk about how fantastic their team-based care was because these midwives would go out into rural Alabama providing care, all kinds of full scope care. And if there was a birth involved, right, they'd come back to Meridian for the baby. And, in general, my short visiting with the midwives, there was a reception before I left, was yeah, we have a lot of restrictions on us. So there were some who were functioning happily, and there were
Yes.
others who could not even establish a practice because of what you just said. They couldn't find a physician or they couldn't afford a physician.
So we need big things to come from this for Mississippi.
We do. I think
And
it could be precedent setting.
absolutely. We need it for all of our maternity care deserts in the area and all the states, and especially those. Oh, I'm still baffled by it. We don't really
Yeah.
know what happens in so many other states that we're not working in, but this really does shed light on a huge problem.
Well, I'm just going to rip off the Band-Aid. It's
Rip it off.
worse in the Southern poverty block,
Yes.
where all those outcomes are the worst of any other geographic region of our country. Most of those laws are promulgated and defended by the state medical boards, who may even control the Department of Health. And so it's very difficult to navigate those conversations. And, I think it might be a good segue into what we're going to talk about today.
I think you're right, Ginger. What are
Yeah,
we going to talk about today, Ginger?
yeah. We're going to talk about wants and needs. It's like, you know, I think some people, when we sort of throw that out, it's like, what are you really talking about here? But you have a really good way of describing, I think, when you coach folks, Denise, why that's important.
Well, I want to say, first of all, that I wish somebody would ask me before I started any job, like what I wanted or needed. It seemed like you just kind of took the first thing that kind of showed up
Yeah.
in your face, and that has worked out quite nicely for the most part for me. I have to say I've fallen into great practices from the very beginning and to the current practice that I work at. But it wasn't without maybe some experiential learning on the way. So I do love really coaching new midwives or midwives making a transition in their career and always starting out with these foundation questions of, really do a self-assessment, a family assessment, a professional assessment of really what you want and need. Need being, of course, those things you absolutely have to agree upon with your employer or institution so that you feel good about going into that job so that you're not compromising and being frustrated and want those things that you also just prefer the little frosting on the cake as well as the cake alone. So, um,
Yeah.
when you ask people to really spend the time to write those things down, they become very, very different than their initial, like, Ginger, the first thing people really say is it's all about, I think the first things that come out is salary
Yeah.
and location,
Exactly.
salary,
Exactly.
location. But they're two of a long list of things that you
Right.
could potentially think about for wants and needs and create them into your ask when you are negotiating. But knowing what you need and want before you even go to the table is pretty important.
Yeah. I think it helps level set for the individual, but also for their defined family, because the decisions that are made, at least in an employment situation, are going to impact a lot of people, besides yourself, and your student loans, and where you can afford to live, and a variety of things that I think when folks pause and let themselves sort of sort out this list, they begin to open their minds a little bit more about what could be priorities and what's, in the negotiation world, what's called your line in the sand. And when we hear folks say, I can't relocate because X, Y, and Z, I know that feeling. For many years in my early career, I couldn't move. I was co-parenting my three children. Um, so there are very serious reasons why people have a line in the sand, but that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't a long list of other things that could help balance out that denominator.
Correct. So let's think about what the needs are, because obviously that is like the most important
Yeah,
things, the things you cannot, move forward with. So you mentioned one, which is really logistics and location. Like,
right.
do you need to stay where you are for your partner, your family, your kids? Recently
Yeah,
someone said, I can't leave because my children need to be in the school that they're at because they might need special help and they're very stable there.
yeah,
Recently worked with a midwife who moved and had to move back to their home because their children were being bullied. But so
uh-huh.
they had to make some compromise really in now commuting a little further than they would have liked. But logistics and location are really a very important thing. And that will lead to eventually a discussion if you do need to relocate. Maybe you're going to do an ask about relocation coverage.
Right.
We'll move into that later. Or can you do a remote hybrid setting? Let's say you're, interested in moving into an academic setting. Can you work in an area where you go to the university perhaps only a certain number of times a year, or you can do a
Exactly.
lot of remote teaching? So logistics and location are really, as you mentioned, one of the top things. And then the financial part, the salary covering, basic living expenses and student loans and whatever else that you may have that is on your plate that you need to pay for. You need to be in a job that you're not becoming more in debt, but that you're
Right.
actually able to
Right.
survive.
Right.
What are some other things,
In
Ginger?
in that vein, Denise,
Yeah.
when you talk about the geography, oftentimes when folks think about a salary, they're not always automatically thinking about cost of living. Like, go to the beautiful state of Colorado where everyone would love to live, but the cost of living is very high, or San Francisco or Boston. I mean, we can name many of them around the country, but you really have to think about the salary in terms of what's it going to cost you to live there.
Yes. And it's not equal, right? So
Right.
really
Right.
being aware of what the salary is in your area and what you need
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
really critical part. So um,
So
what
yeah,
are other,
I have another one. I have
you have
another
another
one.
one? Tell me
And
another one.
this one is really hot on social media listservs that I follow. Sometimes I'll drop in a comment here and there. But this one's warming up. And this one is about new graduates not being prepared.
Yes. Yes.
And the people who are complaining are the folks who are in these roles and services and are just mortified, many of them, that students don't have basic psychomotor skills. And so we get into this. I bring this up because if I were looking for a job as a new graduate, and what I make sure I tell everybody is, what are your strengths and what are your challenges? Like, nobody comes out 100% confident of shoulder dystocia, because true shoulder dystocia doesn't happen that often. You
It
know,
shouldn't.
3% of the time, unless you're causing it. So, it's not unusual for people to want to have some kind of onboarding or guidance, but this whole flare up over the generalization that all new grads are coming out unprepared is really concerning to me.
It is. I think that kind of leads to the overall team. Like the team is important. It is a need. So the team and the scope of practice, it's very, very different for midwives entering the profession as well as those that want to make a change, like that you find the right team. If you are new, it's really important I believe, that you find a team that is willing to provide mentoring and onboarding, you know, in a supportive fashion, that you're not just really dropped into
Yeah,
a
so Denise,
practice. Yes,
that is so important. And because you're in a huge clinical practice,
huge, bigger and bigger every day.
what do you recommend that onboarding and mentoring be? Because those are very different concepts. And if a new graduate, let's not even say hypothetically, a new graduate comes without nursing experience, right? Which
Yes.
is a model. And they want both, right? They want mentoring and they want a very detailed onboarding program. Like, what do y'all offer?
I don't have perhaps the perfect answer for everyone, but I think for those seeking employment, I think it's really important to ask the question of what is the culture of the practice in
Yeah.
regards to in regards to really like how do you take on new graduates? How do you take on non-nurse prepared midwives? And what is the process within the team? I'm very fortunate to say that my practice that I work in, which I think we're up to 17 or 18 midwives, maybe another one along the way. We do have a large amount of new graduates, and they do come with a variety of experience. So you have the nurse experience, not labor and delivery. You have the
Right.
labor and delivery nurse experience coming in as midwives, and then you have the non-nurse experience. And I think it's
Yep.
important on both ends that both the new graduate and the receiving team, I'll say, the
Yeah.
team
Yeah.
that has agreed to hire them is very aware and is willing to take them on. So what does that look like? So it's time. It's time in not having just like a 6 week orientation period. That also includes like what is the medical record system? How
Right.
much awareness of that. I'll tell you, like usually the younger crowd, I can say that now that I'm older, they're very tech savvy, much more tech savvy than I am. So they come on with an ability usually to grasp medical record systems well, but it's the actual hands-on skills and the decision making. We all know that's the most difficult. So I think it's important that there are members of your team, in fact, all that kind of agree to, midwife the midwife. I know I
Right.
use this term every
Right.
once in a while, but it's important if um, are hiring someone to agree to commit to that until there's a level of comfort to allow that new professional to just move on. So
Yeah.
we have had a lot of experiences, and it also I have to say this. So it's the team that has to be receptive, but equally important. And I can give you examples, but I probably won't specifically. Equally important, it is up to the new graduate to be receptive to
Yeah.
learning,
Yeah.
to constructive criticism, to help if they are not quite up to maybe not par is the word, but just the scope or the acuity of
Competence.
the patients.
Competence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
competence. So I think it comes from both sides, just having an openness and
Yeah.
willingness to be part of that. We have a system where where I work with our big midwifery practice of having a constant texting thread to the group. What do I do
Yeah.
in this situation?
Yeah.
How would you handle this
Yeah.
patient?
Good example.
It's really
Good
amazing.
example.
Sometimes you have to turn it off if you're off and you're on the receiving end if
Yeah.
it's too much. But I
Yeah.
do not believe that any of the new midwives hesitate at all to reach out
Yeah.
and ask the question.
So Denise, let's give them another, let's give the new grad a tool here that we learned in negotiation called mirroring. Let's do a tiny little role play here.
All
And
right.
you are going to be you're one of the midwives in the practice looking to hire, and I'm looking to find the fit. Do I want to go work in this high acuity setting when I actually come from community birth and low intervention? So, my question to you, Denise, is how do we prime this so you don't go into a long conversation, if you know what I mean? Can you tell me how many weeks my orientation will be if I'm so lucky to get this job?
Well, how many weeks of orientation will you get if you get this job?
Yeah, how many weeks if I get this job?
Well, if you get this job, it will, you know, depend somewhat on what you need, which will be, determined by really what you're feeling like after a certain number of weeks that you're on the job. Um,
Depend on what I need?
it will depend on what you need. So when you
Depend
come
on
to,
what I need?
and I suppose depend on what we need as well. Anyway, so it really will depend on really your comfort level and your ability to kind of complete or demonstrate some skill level.
Skill levels.
Mhm. So skill levels are important.
Okay, we
Um,
can stop. And what Denise and I are trying to demonstrate is a concept called mirroring. Mirroring is a technique where you're trying to get the other person to give you more information. It's really kind of a cool psychological tool that you should use on people you know really well. But it
Practice.
you know it's a probing technique, right? It's used in negotiation a lot, but it's also used in trying to probe the person for more information. And you could see, Denise and I have done this a lot in some groups that we've worked and taught, but you can see how as I mirrored her statement, she began to continue talking more. And sometimes that's the best strategy for you to learn more about Denise said, the culture of the environment. What is it that you truly are going to walk into? Because now you're getting much more depth than on a piece of paper that says a 3 month orientation. It's tailored to
Correct.
me. It's going to be tailored to me. I was learning that. There's going to be a skill list, is my guess, I hope.
There
So
is a
you're just getting more depth to the idea of what's it going to be like when I walk in there, terrified, um, and don't really know anything. Well, now I've already learned at least three more things from that kind of questioning.
yes.
So, so Denise, we've talked about once, and once again, once are big. Like you
Right.
mentioned relocation. We could talk about student loan repayment. We're not going to go into all of those right now because you're getting the idea. But now we're going to talk about needs.
Right. Well, in Ginger, sometimes those wants are needs.
They could be.
It's hard to determine, for each person what those wants and needs are. There, a lot of them, are very different for each individual person. So for some people, when I talk to them, their need is a supportive environment. And
Yeah,
then, so their need is, also then, as we mentioned, often salary, or another big one that comes up is work-life balance.
right,
Now, this is really, how many times, Ginger, you hear work-life balance
right.
and, they want a full-time job, right? The problem is with a full-time job, and I pause intentionally because what does
What
that
is
mean
that?
to you
What is that?
versus the
Yeah,
20 other midwives that you might be talking with?
right.
And the big concern that we see over and over again is that there is often not a definition of what a full-time
That's right.
position is, a 1.0 FTE. So a work-life balance for one midwife that's a full-time position is very different than for another midwife.
Right.
So it's really important to determine how that institution or place of employment defines a 1.0 FTE if that's what you're applying for.
Boy, we just need to keep singing that verse over and over
Mm,
and over because,
yes,
it is probably one of the most challenging components of an offer to get the employer to define. They say things like, "Oh, you're at will," or "Oh, you're salaried," or "Oh, Denise, we all just share the work equally because that's what midwives do."
divided up between 1 and 5 midwives,
Okay.
That's what they say sometimes, or at
Yeah.
least 40 hours a week, or at least
Minimum. A minimum.
minimum of, like, the terminology that comes out is vaguely, like intentionally vague, I believe, in most cases,
Yes.
because when you write
Yes.
at least or a minimum of, that means I'm at least going to do this, and I might work another extra 20 hours a week for that same
Right.
salary. And that
Right.
does not lead to work-life balance in any way, shape, or form. We
Yeah.
often we often see how that extends into, if you're 1 in 5 midwives or 1 in 7 midwives, what about one of those midwives going taking a vacation,
Hmm.
having hip replacement, maternity leave, even jury duty? I get to go to jury duty next week, maybe. So like
Yeah.
all of those things can impact what that those hours of work are. So
Yeah. We're
it
diverging. We're diverging just a little bit, but you can tell we're passionate about this issue because a lot of people want a job so bad. That's their want. I just want a job. I have a
right.
$150,000 student loan debt that I have to start paying off. I have rent or a house payment. I need food. I have kids or I don't. I need money. So I want a job. That's their want.
What
And,
about other
you
needs,
know,
Ginger?
other needs.
What do you see?
I think what's really important is fit. There's this great book that we recommend everybody. Again, we have some passion for about three books. This is one of the three: Wrong Fit, Right Fit. Are you taking the job because you need the job, or are you taking the job because you're looking for the right fit?
Correct.
The culture, the climate, the respect, the diversity, whatever
The
makes
ability
that.
to grow.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, and so I think oftentimes people don't put fit in the need category.
Correct. Oh, I think 99% of the time that's not on people's radar
Yeah.
for the most part
So
because
how
those
can they ask questions about that? If we want to emphasize this is important, even if in the end it's not going to be what they want it to be, how can they explore that?
I think really just learning what the practice is about, like who is in the practice, how long they've been there,
Mhm.
if there's been any sudden influx or
Exit.
large exit. Yeah, just quite the same.
You know what?
Um,
One of my favorite questions to prompt somebody to ask, and I don't know if anyone's been brave enough to ask it, Denise. Who is, not who, what was the length of time of the last midwife that left the practice? Right? How long were they
yes,
there? Oh boy, does that give you a lot of information?
that talks about just the fit. I mean, some people honestly will stay because they just have to stay. But when you're
Yeah.
looking at large numbers of the stats within the
Yeah.
practice itself, that does tell you a lot
Well,
about.
there is this culture going on that we are very aware of. We've reviewed over 5,000 contracts now in 9 years. We know there is a high attrition rate and they are cycling through new grads like a pipeline, you know, and we know who those folks tend to be. Uh, we're not going to name them, but that's okay.
Yes,
Um, it's almost like you're dispensable,
right. Absolutely.
and
Um,
it's expensive to hire people.
I wish places of employment knew how much cheaper it was to retain
Yeah.
than it was to recruit and train and get everyone, even all the interdisciplinary relationships, like comfortable when you just keep adding new people in. It's
So, Denise, would you say a need is I need to talk to someone besides the recruiter? Like,
yes,
I need,
quickly.
yeah,
I
like,
will. The recruiters know very, very little about the practice.
yeah,
They only know about the job offer. They have some cues about who they pass on through the
yes,
system to be interviewed, but they know very little bit. They know nothing really about the
yeah,
culture or the team. And so just talking to the recruiter is a big mistake.
yeah. Here's
It's
another
the
need. So we're just throwing a bunch of them out there, Denise. Hope we
so
don't
many of them.
overwhelm people. I think it's really important to see the clinical privileges list.
Correct, correct. I mean, first of all, we didn't even talk about scope of practice,
Right,
but this
right,
this really is an important part. So if you're somebody that wants to do full scope or you're somebody who doesn't want to do full scope, you really need to know what that group is doing. And you can get some idea by perhaps looking at the services that the clinic offers, if you want to
right.
look at their group, the internet, or whatever, but really knowing the skills that you're going to be required and or want to do are very important.
Yeah,
And maybe it also kind of leads to, Ginger, like I'm always asking people, what do you want to do in the future? Like there's the now for this job, but what is it that you might want to specialize or what do you bring to the table that's of skills you already have that you might want to bring to that practice and offer that practice
right.
that they might not ask you about, but you might be interested in the long term of developing more and more. So knowing what is currently on the list and what you could potentially add is a really, I think, important thing for longevity of staying invested and interested in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so let's just make a couple closing statements about the individual wants and needs, and then we're going to move into practices, like practices typically in conflict, but that's okay because we believe conflict brings change.
Right.
So for individuals, we really think it's important to think about your wants and needs, what's your line in the sand, and make your wants longer in the ask because negotiation is win-win. Everybody's happier if everybody got a little bit of something, and you will feel happier if you knew that they heard you in some fashion. So that list needs to be long and and have room in there that your needs aren't going to interfere with your final decision.
And key one, Ginger, if you don't ask, you're not going to get.
That's right. They can't read your mind and they're not going to offer you anything. So go for it. Go for it.
Yes.
We want you to earn that extra $12,000 that we've learned from our surveys of midwives who negotiate.
Correct.
$12,000, a lot of money. Okay,
Yes.
let's talk about practices. Do you know of any perfect practices?
No,
It's like a
no, I
family.
do not.
There's no such thing as a perfect family, right? We all live in our communities that we are surrounded in our daily lives. And practices, look, there are great practices that have been around a long time, but one of our opinions is there's always room for quality improvement.
Always. Because there's always more to do and there's always people that are coming in and out.
Yeah,
So always room for quality improvement and, planning and just doing more.
yeah. So some of the things we have identified is practices that are so busy and so focused. A couple things can happen. They're not communicating their practice story to anybody. They're just doing it. They're just doing the story. And the other is that when conflict arises, they become reactive instead of
Oh,
proactive. Does any of
yes.
that like ring any bells for you, Denise?
Well, without without speaking of specifics, yes, there's ebbs and flows within a practice over the years.
Sure.
And there's times where it's, really necessary to, get together. You speak of it correctly when you say that, like, people are working so hard and they're working and doing so much that it's hard to step back and have an umbrella view about
Yeah.
how things could be better, because you're really just burning the candle on both ends and you're just
Yeah.
going from day to day to day.
Yeah.
But there's times where things really need to be halted, paused, and just take a look at how things could become better. Um, yes, I have perhaps been involved in cases where, I mean, in my own practice, where it was necessary to, stop and make sure that the midwives' needs were being met before we lost too many midwives,
Yeah.
to burnout or not
Yeah.
receiving the benefits that they were promised. And even just saying, this is actually what we're doing by collecting data and presenting it to the
Yes.
the people above us,
Yeah.
that had no idea like what our percentages of visits were or even rates of cesareans or anything like that.
Yeah.
Especially like I remember really a pre and post COVID shift in the number of patients
Yeah.
that the midwives were taking care of and the number of deliveries that really spiked pretty high, enough where we really took the data, I mean, simple benchmarking data
Yeah.
that we're collecting for ACNM
Yeah.
and saying this is how it shifted from this year to this year, and now we've had a bigger jump, and how that really led to things such as we can hire more midwives
Right.
because we really need to.
Right.
And that impact was significant for our practice alone. But if you don't stop and collect the data and present the case, you're going to keep doing what you're doing and getting more and more
Yeah.
tired.
Yeah.
And when you're more and more tired, then you're going to have more conflict amongst yourselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's four different, I call them buckets, that we talk to practices about that are trying to begin to explore, like how do we fix this, or how do we get out of this, or how can we all be happier? And
Yes.
those four buckets is, you mentioned one of them, outcomes. And whether it's ACNM benchmarking, whether it's Joint Commission, whether it's Leapfrog, whether it's AIM, make it relevant to your system. They're collecting data for somebody. We know that. Well, there are committees that do that. And so sharing this workload can be really empowering to everybody and feel like they're contributing. And I know, Denise, you're really data driven as a PhD, full-time CNM, full scope, but not everybody is. Some people like to do other things, and that's part of the exploration here. But outcomes is really important. Another thing that's crucially important is press gaining or satisfaction. Whoever's
Yes.
collecting data, either aggregated by the group percentiles or by the providers, I know it can be damning if you get a couple dings. However, ignoring that data is not to your advantage. Another one is a combination of WRVUs per midwife totaled for the group and accounts charged, not received. MGMA and some of the other big consulting firms who come set these salary tiers for everybody, the physicians, the APPs, the PAs, are using tables designed by salary based on both of those numbers because WRVUs and accounts charged are very different mathematically. And if a practice doesn't know those, they're missing the most important part of the conversation the C suite wants to hear,
Yes.
the fiscal numbers. And the last one is actual hours worked.
Worked.
We have told so many people, just like lawyers do time tracking, they bill by the quarter hour. You can get free apps that are time trackers. And if you define the variables, what are patient facing hours? What is call hours from home? What is administrative hours charting and going over labs so that everybody's tracking the same defined variables. 3 months. Commit to 3 months. Denise and I are going to promise you are working more than your defined FTE.
For sure.
So that is your story. And that story needs to be captured, in our opinion, quarterly and synthesized annually. And that quarter should go up the food chain. Your practice manager, the senior physician, the OB department chair, the chief financial officer, the C suite, and the hospital board, because we promise you, nobody knows shit about you. I'm
I
sorry,
guarantee you,
they don't.
they have no idea all the
They don't.
time that you're putting in that is not coming out as just, WRVOs, et cetera.
So we have to own part of that. We have to own part of that. And if you have that story that you're updating quarterly and put it in a simple PowerPoint, people are not going to like me for saying this, Denise, but Chat GPT will do a really good job of that for you. Um, then you become prepared and not blindsided when somebody says you aren't performing well enough. And you just sit there going, well, we're great people. Our patients love us, right?
I mean, all that is true and important, but you need the numbers.
You
You,
need everything.
you need all of it. In
So
addition,
those
I
are the
meant.
four buckets. Yeah, those are the four buckets. And we say this at least 3 or 4 times weekly. And it's not easy to do, but if you just start the journey to see what's possible, you're beginning to build the leverage, which is what negotiation is all about. The art of persuasion, if you don't want to call it negotiation, is about facts. Help
Yes.
me understand why you think every midwife charging 1,300,000 a year, which is the average we see in the public domain. We have the surveys. How are we not generating enough when you're only paying me 130,000? Help me understand. We got to start getting smarter. So, what about the affiliates, Denise? What about the affiliates? We
Oh, the
have a lot of
affiliates,
inactive affiliates.
we know that, well, we know that the number of members that are members in the affiliates is so much lower than what every state has
Oh
for
yeah.
of midwives in general. So it's I really don't know exactly for each state, and I think some states are much more active than others. I can tell you for our state, we have probably 70 out of 280 midwives are active members of our affiliate. And you can't do a lot when not everybody is involved and can take kind of the role. Like, yeah, I think we all need more active engagement in, our affiliate chapters with ACNM so that we can do some great work because, every state has some significant barriers that they can work on, and every midwife has a different skill that they can absolutely use, to promote, some of these major barriers to work against them. Um, I think it's really, really helpful to get people together and create agendas and identify what really matters most.
Yeah.
And if you complain that nothing is getting better, ask yourself what you're doing to make it better,
Right.
on your own individual level. And we always know that coming together and working together is what really leads to change, and everything can be possible.
Yeah. I would just add that I think we are at a crossroads. You see us use that phrase in our conferences because of all the things going on right now that impact the outcome and health of families to be heard. But the problem is we don't have an organized voice. We certainly
Yes.
don't at the state level. And I think I put out a post a couple days ago. People are sort of going, "Go Ginger." I guess when you turn 70, you can just say what you want and not care about it. But anyway,
Absolutely.
there are probably, I think I put 10 things up there an affiliate could be working on, and I said, "What are you doing? What's your affiliate doing?" Because I don't know of one that has all of those 10 issues conquered. And until we can set aside our differences, which every organization has, every family has differences, and work on what could be a common win and begin to learn how to sort of trust each other again and value each other even though we have differences, we're just going to fight ourselves into the same quagmire we've been in for the last 4 decades. So anyway, I think
It's,
affiliates have the opportunity, just as practices and just as individual midwives, to think about their wants and their needs. And that's going to change.
it will. I think you're right. I think we have to come together. This is a very divisive time
Yeah.
on so many levels.
Yeah.
I feel like it
So we,
needs to
you know, we
stop.
have we have some tools. If affiliates are interested, they can email us. We didn't create them. They're out in the social sciences domain about how to do sort of an internal assessment of your organization and an external assessment, a SWOT and a PESTLE. People can look those up. SWOT and PESTLE. And survey yourself, survey the members, and try to tease out in some kind of gathering. One day would be ideal. What's servicing? What are the themes that are coming out here, and how can you figure out how to do something? And I'm going to just give a shout out to the great state of Oklahoma and Maryland, two states I have intimate experience with, who have done these kinds of set aside commitments to talk together and have just taken off in ways that are mind blowing. So kudos, Oklahoma, Maryland midwives. We are so proud of you. And we hope other affiliates realize that now is the time. Now is the time.
Now, yeah.
Uh, so, anything else about wants and needs, Denise, that you
I
could
mean,
think
Ginger, I could go off and off about, on and on and off about all of these things, but I think I really think, just sitting down and figuring out what those are is really the key for
of? Yeah,
everybody in their job transitions, in the starting a job, and all of those things. And I honestly think periodically in your career, I'm going to say like every 2 or 3 years, it's fair to yourself to sit back and say, has anything shifted? And do I want to do something different? And what does that look like?
yeah. So you know what I think we should do, Denise? We'll put
What?
the PDF of the wants and needs tool on the RSS feed in Buzzsprout. We will put the links to the SWOT and the PESTLE survey tools so that people can access those, and hopefully nudge them a little bit to do some self-reflection, which would be my call to action. What would be yours?
Well, I was going to say that as well, but you know what?
Hey,
We're going to let you have that. My call to action then will be, become involved with your affiliate. Honestly, I'm going to say that to myself as well. Become involved. Join your affiliate, join ACNM and your affiliate, and find a project that you can work on together. Something that you're invested in, something you believe in, and just rally up your other midwives that you work with.
yeah, I absolutely agree with you. You know what else I think we should share, Denise? The Possibilist midwives are going to Chicago.
We are. We're going to Chicago.
Yeah,
It's
we're
not
going to
that
be
far away
there.
from me.
Yeah, we're going to be there February 9th. They have a 2-day conference. with the Illinois affiliate and the UIC midwifery program. Our friend Kirby is helping organize this conference for the second year, and Illinois is rallying as well. So, what are we going to talk about there, Denise?
Well, we're not going to talk about the fact that the Bears lost and they're not in the playoffs and they won't be
Yeah.
in the Super Bowl that day.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kirby. But we are going to talk about a lot of these topics that we currently are covering now, as well as just negotiation strategies, and all the things that we love to do best, Ginger.
Yeah.
Everything related to somewhat of the business of midwifery and valuing who you are
Yeah.
and
How to
bringing it
do
to
that?
how
How do
to
they
do
do
that.
it? How do
Yeah.
they do it? Yeah. It's actually an abbreviated version of the 4-hour workshop we did in Palm Springs that was really very positively received. And I'm glad that you and I are gonna do this together.
Yeah.
So, our next podcast, which will be in February, we have a special guest coming on, actually from the Grow Midwives team, but I think she's special because every single time I listen to this person talk, I seem to learn something new.
Oh, she's special.
Yeah.
Are you going to say who it is?
Why don't you go for it?
Well, we are having Arden come on, who is our coding and billing specialist. She will be coming on. Actually, we have a pod or like a webinar that's going to like come out probably before she does.
February 10th. Yeah, but you
Yes.
know what, Denise? It's now closed because we have 100 people that registered.
So Arden Schwenker is going to come on and be our guest and talk about billing and coding. And you can send some questions in ahead of time that she could address specifically, that will help to direct some of the conversation or the things that you're interested in learning.
Absolutely. I think that her webinar will also be recorded. We'll put it on our YouTube channel after the event. But we would love to have you send some questions into the Possibilist Midwife email. That'll also be available to you at the end of the recording here. But there is no stupid question. And honestly, every time I hear her talk, the first thing she says is, "It depends."
Right.
Because it depends on the payer, it depends on the state, it depends on the rendering provider, the billing provider, the payer. I mean, it's so complicated. And her expertise as a certified biller combined with a compliance officer, she holds the road, man.
I've been doing this for so long, and every time I also learn something that I maybe should have known or should have done. But it always becomes a little bit clearer when we, talk with Arden.
Yeah. So that's it for today. Our second podcast, Denise. This is going to be just so much fun. I hope people, first of all, just enjoy listening to us because we don't know what we sound like, but moreover that they're getting some ideas.
Right, right, absolutely. I think whatever spark that you can get from this, take it and run.
Yeah. So everybody, stay safe as this winter storm comes in. And Denise, I'll see you on the next podcast.
I'll see you then, Ginger.
Alrighty.
Have a
Bye
good
bye.
day. Bye.